Okay.
Great. Thanks, Colton. I'll start off by saying Happy Nurses Day to everyone, and I appreciate all of your dedication to the residents of Kansas. It's a special day for all of us. So an exciting meeting here, especially on Nurses Day. So good morning. I am Juliana Reshik, and I serve as president of the Kansas State Board of Nursing. I ask the members of the board to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely. Rebecca Saunders, and I believe she is absent. Audrey Goldsmith, and she too is absent. Patricia Zeller.
Present.
Andrea Watson.
Present.
Melissa Orpeza.
Present.
Lori Owen.
Present.
Giovanni Gonnet, and I believe she is absent. Gita Noble.
Present.
And Jade Ramsdale.
Present.
Thank you. I also ask the following staff members who are present to respond. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator.
Present.
Adrian Guerrero, Director of Operations. Linda Davies, Practice Specialist.
Present.
Janelle Martin, Nursing Education Compliance Officer. Chelsea Stevenson, Education Specialist in C&E. And Jill Simmons, Executive Assistant.
Present.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to make the following statements regarding this meeting that is being conducted remotely. Public comment allows individuals to address the board about their concerns, but the Kansas Open Meetings Act, which is known as KOMA, does not require the board to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Today, we will not have public comment due to the length of the meeting and the possibility that the connection for the remote meeting may be lost. Because we are conducting this public meeting by Zoom and YouTube, I state for the record the following information. On May 2nd, 2022, the board sent notice of the meeting for the board to all individuals who have requested notice of the board's meetings. Additionally, the notice and agenda were posted on the board's website, ksbn.kansas.gov. The notice contains the internet links to attend the meeting by Zoom and YouTube. The notice also contains the Zoom telephone number to attend the meeting. These electronic mediums allow the public to attend this meeting free of charge by either video conference or telephone. The notice also advises individuals to contact the board's office at 785-296-2967 if they experience a technical difficulty during the meeting. You may obtain a copy of the notice and agenda at the website or by sending an email to carol.moreland@ks.gov. with the subject line, request for the agenda, and the board staff will send it to you. The only mediums for interactive communication offered for this meeting are the connections by Zoom and YouTube as previously stated. Each member of the board staff, or presenter shall state the person's name and title each time the person speaks or votes, as the case may be. Each participant to this meeting shall ensure microphones, phones, or other electronic devices are on mute when the participant is not speaking. Each motion will be clearly stated before the board votes, and the president will announce the results of the final vote. A statement or motion will clearly identify and authorize by delegation each member of the board or staff who will be permitted to sign any document on behalf of the board. The meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the board's website. The board has the following items listed on its agenda. Call to order, KAR 60-11-101, definition of expanded roles, limitations, restrictions, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-103, licensure and educational requirements for advanced practice registered nurses, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-104, functions of the advanced practice registered nurse and the role of a nurse practitioner, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-104A, protocols, requirements, prescription orders, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-105, function of the advanced practice registered nurse and the role of the nurse midwife, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-107, functions of the advanced practice registered nurse and the role of clinical nurse specialist, temporary and permanent. KAR 60-11-113, license renewal, temporary and permanent, and then adjournment. The meeting is now called to order, and the board will begin the meeting with the next item on the agenda. So Carol, I might ask you if you would say a few words and maybe give us a little bit of a background of how we got to this meeting here today and what we'll be looking at.
All right. Good morning. Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator. And we are here today because Senate substitute for House Bill number 2279 was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. And that's also well known as the APRN bill. Probably you've heard it talked about that way. It does have some changes for the APRN practice in Kansas. And so what I have put in your packet is the actual bill. And then based on the changes that it's making to 651130 in our Nurse Practice Act, we have to make changes to 7 of our regulations. The bill actually starts on page 2 in your packet. And you will notice if you look at section 1, that is the section that amends 651130, which is part of our Nurse Practice Act. So the changes, just kind of an overview of the changes that were made, is they brought in national certification. So you will see on or after July 1st, 2023, an applicant for initial licensure as an advanced practice registered nurse shall have a current specific role in population, shall have advanced practice registered nurse certification in such applicant specific role and population focus that has been granted by a national certifying organization recognized by the board and whose certification standards are approved by the board as equal to or greater than the corresponding standards established by the board. And then an advanced practice registered nurse whose initial licensure is prior to July 1st, 2023, may submit evidence of such certification to the body upon renewal. So that's a change from how we have it now. And then if you look on down the bill this is on page 3, and I'm only covering the part that has been changed, and that's what you see in italics in this bill. It talks about prescribing. An advanced practice registered nurse may prescribe durable medical equipment and prescribe, procure, and administer any drug consistent with such licensee's specific role and population focus, except an advanced practice registered nurse shall not prescribe any drug that is intended to cause an abortion. Any drug that is a controlled substance shall be prescribed, procured, or administered in accordance with the Uniform Controlled Substance Act. And then it goes on down to say that an advanced practice registered nurse will comply with federal drug enforcement administration requirements related to controlled substances. So those are changes with the prescribing authority that APRNs have now. And then it goes on down to say that an advanced practice registered nurse shall maintain malpractice insurance coverage as a condition of rendering professional clinical services as an advanced practice registered nurse in this state and shall provide proof of insurance at the time of licensure and renewal of licensure. The requirements of this subsection shall not apply to an advanced practice registered nurse who, number 1, practices solely in employment for which the advanced practice registered nurse is covered under the Federal Tort Claims Act or the Kansas Tort Claims Act. Number 2, exemption practices solely as a charitable healthcare provider under KSA 756102 and amendments thereto. And number 3 is serving on active duty in the armed forces of the United States. So basically what these changes in 651130 is taking out the need for a collaborative agreement. It's taking away that barrier that APRNs need to have a collaborative agreement with a responsible physician. So these changes in here have led to 7 regulations that have to be changed. The rest of this bill actually starts in section 2 and goes into pharmacy and all of that, but that is not changes to the Nurse Practice Act. That would be another licensing board's act. So what we really have to pay attention to is what's in section 1. So if you go to page 17, this is where it starts with the draft regulation changes. And we basically have to do temp and permanent because there are 2 timelines in this bill. And that's been a little confusing for people. July 1st of 2023 is for the national certification. The other changes take effect July 1st of 2022, which is this year. So we do not have a whole lot of time to get these regulation changes through a very long system that we have in the state that has to take place. So for that reason, we're doing temp and permanent that was started at the very same time. And they're both, they kind of stay together through the first 3 agencies that have to approve them. That is Secretary of Administration, the Attorney General's Office, and Division of Budget. At that point in time, then the temporary is kind of split away from the permanent and they're handled differently. The temporary we can get in place much faster. The permanent ones, if you remember from some that we've been through recently, we have to do a public hearing. We have to have a 60-day comment period. So that kind of lengthens that out. There was no way that we could get permanent ones through by July 1st, based on the timeline that we have to work with here. So for that reason, it was decided to have temporary and permanent. And our plan is to have the temporary in place by July 1st. I have been working with Charles, our legal counsel, on these changes, so he is aware of those. So if you look at page 17, the first one is 60-11-101 that talks about the definition of the expanded role, limitations, and restrictions. Basically, what we've done here is take out, strike out. Anything that you see has strikeout will actually come out of the regulation once it's approved and it's all the way through. So pretty well what's been taken out of here is any language that has to do with authorization for collaborative practice, because they will no longer need that. So you will see the strikeouts actually have to do with that. And then the history section changed to show that the Senate substitute for House Bill 2279. 60-11-103 has to do with the licensure and the education requirements. And what we put in here is that they have to, as part of licensure, they'll have to submit proof of their APRN certification in the applicant's specific role and population focus granted by a national certifying organization recognized by the board and whose certification standards are approved by the board as equal to or greater than the corresponding standards established by the board for initial licensure applications submitted on or after July 1st of 2023. And then number 4, they have to submit proof of malpractice insurance coverage if rendering professional clinical services as an APRN, unless the APRN meets one of the exceptions listed in that bill, which I went over. So those 2 you'll see are underlined, so they will be added to this. That is pretty well everything that will be added to this, except again, the history section on all of these are changed. 60-11-104 is functions of the advanced practice registered nurse in the role of nurse practitioner. The only changes on here is the strikeout for the based on authorization for collaborative practice, since they no longer will need that. 60-11-104A had to do with protocol requirements, prescription orders. We changed that heading a little bit to just be prescription orders. And this is where you see there's a fair amount of strikeout in this one. And what we have added is the new language out of the bill that an advanced practice registered nurse may prescribe durable medical equipment, prescribe, procure, or administer any drug consistent with such licensee's specific role and population focus, except any drug that's intended to cause an abortion. Prescribe, procure, or administer any drug that is a controlled substance in accordance with the Uniform Controlled Substance Act. And then if you go down to the bottom of page 26, each prescription order, the only thing that we changed for that is under number 1, we struck out the practice location of the advanced practice registered nurse, and then also, you know, the information about the responsible physician, because of course they will not need that. I think that's the main changes in there, other than the history section. 60-11-105 is the functions of the advanced practice registered nurse in the role of nurse midwife. Again, the only changes in this are just a strikeout on the authorization for collaborative practice. They will no longer need that. 60-11-107 is the functions of the advanced practice registered nurse in the role of clinical nurse specialist. Again, the only changes here is the strikeout needing the authorization for the collaborative practice and the history section. And then the last temporary is 60-11-113, licensure renewal. And what we added on this one is on page 33. Basically says an APRN whose initial licensure is prior to July 1st, 2023, may submit evidence of their APRN certification to the board upon renewal. And then an APRN shall provide proof of malpractice insurance coverage at the time of renewal of license if rendering professional clinical services, unless the advanced practice registered nurse meets one of the exceptions listed in the bill, which I covered. And then again, the history section. That ends the temporary ones. Now there will be one sentence that will be added to these, and it basically says, this regulation shall be in effect on or after July 1st, 2022. And the reason we put that in there is because if these they get approved and everything but before July 1st, we just want to make sure that it's very clear that these do not actually become effective until July 1st of 2022. Now you go into pretty much the very same thing, only they're permanent. Okay, so I'm not going to go through those because they basically have all the same changes. So you will see pretty much what we did. The only changes made to these were to be in compliance with that bill and to use the language in that bill. So the reason that we're having this special board meeting is I would like to take these draft regulations through the process of approval in the state, but I need the board's approval to do that. So if you have questions, if you, I don't know if you have any questions for me. Charles is also on here, I believe, if you have any questions of legal counsel, anything along that line.
This is Patsy. I don't have a question. I just wondered if you would help with some more clarification. Had a lot of questions, and I see a lot of participants here on this stream that the exact job of this regulatory board, that the bill had been passed and these regulations are driven by that law that's been passed. Would you just go through that a little bit for us? So exactly what we're trying to do today is to follow that law with these regulations.
Right. This is Carol Moreland, Executive Administrator. And anytime a law is passed that has some changes to our Nurse Practice Act, we have to look at, okay, this was a statute. The 651130 was a statute that changes were made to. So then we have to look at any regulations that are tied back to 651130 to see what changes need to be made in those regulations. Because of course the regulations have to correspond to the statute. And since these changes were made in the statute, we have to make the changes in the regulations. Is that what you want me to say, Patsy, or?
Yeah, just a clarification that we have to follow that statute to the T. We can't do anything outside of that with any other explanation of those regulations that the statute does not lead us to.
Yeah, basically the only authority that we have as a regulatory board is our statutes. And then our rules and regulations come off from the statutes. And you'll see that in the history section of these because it relates back to the statute that gives us the authority to do this and gives us the authority to implement this. And so that's why you see we made the changes in the history section of each of those to tie back to Senate sub for House Bill 2279, because that's basically what's giving us the authority to make these changes and implement these changes based on what that bill says. I don't know if Charles wants to say anything else, but that's pretty much why we have to make these changes.
Yeah, this is Charles Macheras. I'm the counsel for the board. Yeah, anytime the legislature changes the statutes, we have to go back and look at the regulations just to make sure we don't have anything in the regs that contradict the new statutes. And so Carol did a very good job of going through and surgically deleting just the things that contradict the new statute. So there's very few material changes besides that.
This is Carol Moreland again, Executive Administrator. And sometimes when we make changes to regulations, there's also a push to change a lot of other stuff in that regulation. And I can just say part of the approval process, when it goes to Department of Administration, they look at the grammar, the format, all of that. And that has to be perfect before they do their approval stamp. Then it goes to the Attorney General's office. The role of the Attorney General's office is to look at the legality. And if we try to make some changes that legally we cannot make changes to based on this bill, then it's not going to be approved by the Attorney General's office and it's not going to go any further. We'll have to make changes and start back over through the process. And then once we get the stamp from the Attorney General's office, it goes to Division of Budget. And typically they want to look at the economic impact of this. And typically the changes that we make don't have a huge economic impact, like millions of dollars or something like that. So usually there's no problem getting it through them. But then also that's part of the process is there is a joint committee of legislators that will look at both the temp and the permanent ones, and they can also give their comments. But the regulations are truly up to the board. And so that's kind of, I think the nice thing is there's some checks and balances here. Any other questions or?
Thank you. You did a great job. Thank you.
Carol, this is Jill, and we've had some questions being posed to us from the audience. One of them is, what are the exceptions to the need for liability coverage? Are there any requirements for amount of coverage?
Okay, as far as the exceptions, I think I read these earlier, but basically what that section says is an advanced practice registered nurse shall maintain malpractice insurance coverage as a condition of rendering professional clinical services as an advanced practice registered nurse in this state, and shall provide proof of insurance at the time of licensure and renewal of license. The requirements of this subsection shall not apply to an advanced practice registered nurse who, number one, practices solely in employment for which the advanced practice registered nurse is covered under the Federal Tort Claims Act or the Kansas Tort Claims Act. Number two, practices solely as a charitable healthcare provider under KSA 75-6102 and amendments thereto. Or number three is serving on active duty in the armed forces of the United States. So those are the exceptions that are listed in this bill. And I see there's also a question, are there any requirements for the amount of coverage? Not in this bill. So I can't really speak as to why there were not any put in the bill, but there wasn't put in the bill. So that's kind of what we have to work with here. And when it says, another question is, what does may submit mean for the previously licensed APRNs? That means that we cannot require you to submit. May is up to you. Shall means that you have to. Okay.
Hi, Carol, this is Melissa.
Yes.
Hi, will you clarify that there will be comment time and what that looks like, please?
Thank you, Melissa. Yes, thank you. I think I talked on the permanent ones. There is a 60-day comment period. We actually publish a public hearing date once the permanent ones go all the way through those 3 agencies and they get stamped approved. Then we set up a public hearing date. That has to be at least 60 days out. That is published. It's known to anybody and everybody. And we also have copies of the draft regulations there. During that 60-day comment period, anyone is welcome to submit written comments. Positive, negative, whatever. You are welcome to submit those. You can just email them. There'll be directions, but you email them to me. I compile all of those. And then at the public hearing, anyone who wants to give verbal comments can do that. You do not have to do that. You can just do written ones if you would prefer to do that. The public hearing is open. It's usually by conference call, so anyone can listen in that wants to, even if you don't want to say anything, you just want to hear. At that point, I will be also reading any written comments that have come to me before that public hearing. And then the public hearing is the last time that the comments can be given to us, because you've had at least 60 days to do that. Then what I do is I put all of those comments together along with a draft of the permanent regulations that was approved by those 3 committees or those 3 agencies. And then that goes in a board packet, and then the board has a chance to review all those comments, review the proposed regulations, and then it's up to the board whether they want to make any more changes, whether they want to go with what they have. But I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that the board does see all of those comments that come in to me or are given in the public hearing. Does that answer your question, Melissa?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Carol. So we won't, as we cited at the beginning, we won't take questions today. Is there any other discussion from board members? Okay, so I believe we don't need a roll call vote, because what we're looking at today is the draft language that will then move forward through the process, and there will be lots of opportunity for input in future meetings. So with no other discussion, Jill, do you have a proposed motion?
Yes, I actually have 2 motions. The first one, is there a board member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the following temporary regulations to proceed through the approval process. KAR 60-11-101, KAR 60-11-103, KAR 60-11-104, KAR 60-11-104A, KAR 60-11-105, KAR 60-11-107, and KAR 60-11-113.
Hello, Madam Chair. This is Melissa. I so move. Make the
Great.
motion.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there a second?
This is Patsy and I so second.
Thank you, Patsy. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed signify by saying no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. I think it's very fitting that our two APRNs moved and seconded that bill. Thank you. And the second motion, Jill?
Is there a board member who would like to make the following motion? I move to approve the following permanent regulations to proceed through the approval process. KAR 60-11-101, KAR 60-11-103, KAR 60-11-104, KAR 60-11-104A, KAR 60-11-105, KAR 60-11-107, and KAR 60-11-113.
Hello, Madam President. This is Melissa. I so motion.
Thank you, Melissa.
This is Patsy and I second that motion.
Thank you, Patsy. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Any opposed signify by saying no. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Madam President, this is Carol Moreland, and I just want to make sure that the board members are aware that on the temporary ones, not the permanent, but the temporary ones, once they go through the process and they're ready to be adopted, there probably will have to be another special board meeting because we're not going to be able to leave these for you to approve until the end of June, which is when you meet next. Okay, because they have to be published in the Kansas Register and stuff like that. So it's going to have to take place before then. So there will be another special board meeting, basically to look at the temp ones and adopt them. And that one would have to be by roll call.
Thank you for that information, Carol. We'll be prepared. So, without any other business today, I hope you have a wonderful day and do something fun for Nurses Day. And that will conclude our meeting.